So I'd like to tell a story about something that happened a long time ago in my practice. This happened in Seattle many years ago. So he called me in a panic one day and he said, I can't move. I woke up with this very severe back spasm and I could barely get out of bed. I'm in a lot of pain. I can't find a comfortable position to be in. And can you see me today? So anyways, he came in and he was hunched over and in a lot of pain. I think his breathing was uh, difficult, and had the classic posture of somebody with a severe acute back pain. And he was very worried that he may have blown a disc or something like that. So I started as I normally do, which is I do a medical history. So I started asking him, if he had a history of back pain, if he had a history of trauma, if this has ever happened before, and kind of what was the recent history that led up to the event of him waking up suddenly with this situation. And so I had him lay down. I started working on his abdomen, which is where I normally start. And as I was working on him, I was still asking questions and kind of extracting the story. And it turned out that the weekend before, this happened probably on a Wednesday, kind of midweek. But the weekend before had actually been the first really nice weekend in Seattle after that very long winter. And so the sun was out. I think it was a long weekend for some reason, and a lot of people had barbecues that weekend. And so this person was a pretty health conscious person, and he cooked a lot of his own meals. He had a pretty varied diet. But this weekend for him was a celebration, and it was a barbecue with a lot of friends gathered, and I believe probably music and everything. But the barbecue was mostly heavy meat, like hamburgers and ribs and possibly fish or something like that. Very little vegetables, and also a certain amount of beer. I don't know how much he drank, but he was mostly drinking beer. And he had a great time there. And then a couple days later, he suddenly woke up in the morning with this terrible pain. And he called me for this emergency. Anyways, as I was starting to work with him, I'm noticing, as I'm working in his belly, I noticed this big hard mass. And it was painful if I pushed directly on it. But as I explored it, I could feel that there was some differentiation there. So there were, within this hard mass, there were some softer areas, there were some harder areas, and as I began working on it, I started using my fingers to kind of vibrate into the softer parts and see if I could open things up a little bit and get things to relax. And as I was doing that, we continued talking, but also I could start to hear and feel gurgling within the area underneath my fingers. And every once in a while I would feel like something would relax and a hard place would get suddenly softer. And as I continued working, I started to feel the softer spaces getting bigger, and I started being able to distinguish that that this mass was not one big mass. It was a, a number of different things happening there. And so as it started to relax and I started to separate things, I started realizing that this was a condition that in Chinese medicine and Japanese medicine, they just call it stuck food. And what that means is, for whatever reason, as food is passing through your intestines, it gets stuck somewhere. And in this particular case, given the history of it, I started thinking about some things. One of the things that I know is that the digestion process of meat is called hydrolysis. So what happens is meat is made up of these long chains of protein, and your body digests them by breaking them apart, by taking off amino acids one after the other. And the process that's used to do that is called hydrolysis, which means every time you take an amino acid off, you have to add some water to it. And in this particular case, he had a meal that was mostly heavy animal protein, and along with that he was drinking beer, which is dehydrating. And as this food was passing through his intestines, his digestion process was, using water to break down the proteins and stuff. But at a certain point, because he was dehydrated, it got dry. And then I believe when that process started happening, just like in our bigger system, sometimes when things like that happen, or unexpected things or things like that, his small intestine started to clench around that area. And so the peristalsis stopped, and the dehydration got worse, and it formed this hard mass in his abdomen. And so as I was working on it, I would say I worked with him for probably 30 to 45 minutes, and primarily in the abdomen. But as I was working, I started to feel things soften, and the spaces between things get bigger, and every once in a while something would gurgle, and then something small, something that was hard would soften, and then it would be easier to open up spaces in between things. And during the course of the treatment, this big mass separated into several smaller masses, and then I could do some stretching and more vibration, and during the course of the treatment, the mass kind of slowly came apart and then faded away. So by the end of the treatment, when I felt like his abdomen was more relaxed and I didn't feel any of that stuff happening anymore, I started having him move his legs around and pull his feet up and move his knees from side to side, and see if he could roll onto his side and sit up and then stand up, and the back pain was completely gone. This is one of my favorite stories to tell about like a success story of abdominal manual therapy. And for a couple of reasons. One is that in Japanese medicine, they have a principle called Honji treatment versus Hyoji treatment. And in Chinese, they have the same concept. They call it the ban and the biao. And it means they represent it as the roots and the branches of a tree. And what the concept means, Honji means the root treatment, or the treatment of the whole system to kind of bring the system into balance. And Hyoji treatment is considered the branch treatment, and that means treating the symptoms. If this guy had come in and I thought as a therapist, oh my God, this guy's pain is so severe, and it's obviously a back pain. And if I had focused immediately on trying to treat the area of the pain, I would have completely missed the actual problem that he was having and never been able to address it. So that's one of the reasons that I like this story as an example of what you can do with abdominal manual therapy that you would not be able to do in any other way. This is one of the things I'll be teaching in my abdominal manual therapy program online, is how to begin training yourself to be able to discover things like this and treat your clients sometimes for very unexpected things.